Josh, Catherine, welcome to the latest AlixPartners Tech 10 video. We'll be discussing data and the role of AI in value.
Great to be here, Brian.
Thank you, delighted to be here.
So Josh, dunnhumby's built a world-class reputation and global leader in the area of data and particularly understanding how data translates into insights. So I'm curious as to what you're seeing now as the trends that AI is enabling, both sort of traditional elements of AI and Gen AI.
dunnhumby is interesting because dunnhumby was always about actually very early machine learning methods, AI. I mean, to give you an example, we processed 60 billion personalized offers last year alone. But the exciting thing is actually the shift of the use cases. So if I go back traditionally, the obvious ones as a retailer, and obviously between a retailer and supplier, how do you get the right products on the right shelves for customers? So what we're seeing, the big shift is, whereas traditionally dunnhumby has used AI and science, but the decisions were made by humans, so it was recommendations. The huge change is those decisions being made by retailers and some suppliers using algorithms and applications, whether it's optimizing the space, optimizing the range, optimizing the price. And it's really shifting that very fast.
And is that something that you're driving or that your customers are sort of pulling?
The pull from clients is probably the highest it's been for 10 plus years, because a lot of retailers are trying to hire in-house chief data officers, digital officers, boards are pushing on AI. And as they're starting to do that, they're realizing it's not quite as simple as it wanted to be. Certainly, though, for our existing clients, we're delighted. We've been encouraging this direction of travel, and feel it's much more of an open door to do that now than it has been perhaps the last few years.
And are they sort of pushing you towards Gen AI, or is that not something you're seeing so much of?
Gen AI is really interesting. So let me be clear. The traditional dunnhumby skill was machine learning. It's AI, causal AI, which is where you used to have a correlation, but you didn't know what caused it. How do we make that happen? The really interesting thing about Gen AI is, as we all know, it's about the content, whether that's people sitting in a verbal in a contact center, whether it's messages and the media briefs. And one of the really interesting bits is there's a real shift here between the retailer and the suppliers, the brands. Because if you're a retailer, you can tell with your data what customers are substituting. Are they substituting, for example, a branded product, could be a cereal, for a private label one? You'd want to use that comparison in terms of what's the message you're then saying to your customers, whether that's in a coupon or an offer, or even using your media. So it changes your whole creative brief that you would create and allow you to be much more segmented for different customers.
Maybe, Catherine, you could talk about where you've seen Gen AI used in other industry applications.
I find it quite interesting. Gen AI, I think, is having an impact sort of through the value chain of data and analytics. So, for example, retailers using AI to create product descriptions, to gather the images and all of the ingredients, etc., to upload products onto the website, for example, so sort of data management things. You're also seeing AI being used more in creation of synthetic data sets, for example, for training models, particularly where you've got a lot of personal data issues, or, for example, you're testing. You want to be able to test scenarios that go outside the normal bounds. And one of the most interesting places where Gen AI is starting to impact is the way in which people interact with the data and the insight and the analytics. And I think it will become, I'm not sure it's there yet, will become a sort of quite revolution in terms of how it democratizes use of data. Because whereas historically people needed to look at reports or information and synthesize it, you can now start to have a conversation with your data, which I think will sort of move the bounds in terms of how organizations, you sort of mix their judgment experience with the way in which they're using data to make decisions, for example. That doesn't remove the need to have a maturity and understanding of how to interpret information and blend your experience in.
And Josh, you sit sort of at the interface between retailers and consumer products have the opportunity now to go much more direct to the consumer. Well, how do you see that trend and being impacted by the data availability and the general trend towards AI tools?
So we see the difference for different product categories, interestingly. There are certain categories, if you look at certain clothing brands where you've got the manufacturers wanting to have a much more direct relationship with their consumers end to end. There are other categories where even if you might download an app or do data, in reality, the consideration is enough. You're going to buy it in the supermarket, or you're going to buy it through an online experience that you want in that case. And in that case, the really interesting bit is there's a bit of a chicken and egg between the suppliers and the retailers, because suppliers who have all the money on the marketing and do the product innovation want the data, and they'll do their test. But in reality, it's that point of decision about, do you pick up one product or the product next door to it, or if the retailer slightly reorganizes what's next to it, people will make a different decision. So you need to get the data in a granular enough format for the supplier to make it work. You need access to a granularity and a richness of data that you haven't traditionally had from sort of market share suppliers. So ironically, although we're here to talk about AI, as ever, getting the right sets of data at the right level of specificity is a critical part to that.
How would a smaller organization go about accessing that data? And in this context, as you and I have talked about before, smaller companies can actually still be very large companies in the context of global data.
Let me make also, finally, one really positive comment for those. If you're not the biggest retailer in the market, there are no shortage of clear value propositions as a specialist. You see this in some of the more private label or other businesses, to be clear on that proposition and then deliver that through both a range of products and then how do you communicate to your customers to make that work.
And Catherine, in terms of roadmap and the journey that organizations can go on to, you obviously meet businesses of very different levels of maturity in terms of data and their ability to extract information from data. Are there some generic rules? Are there some things which apply across industry? How would somebody start?
The first is, you're picking up on one of Josh's comment, be razor focused on what you're trying to achieve as a business and work back from what needs to be true or how can I best unlock that, as opposed to starting with, what data do I want or what data capabilities do I need? There's got to be to an end. You absolutely need to build up the data and technology to unlock what you need to do, but you don't need to wait for that to happen before you can start working on whatever it is you need to work. So don't allow yourself to fall into that trap. You will have pockets of data. Start working with them. Start working with the things you've got and getting value. And then the third thing I'd say is, even if you've not got all that infrastructure in place, simply start gathering data and start using it, and start encouraging the organization to share data between silos and start breaking down the silos in organization.
And people talk about unified data layers and other terms like that. Is that necessary, or to your earlier point, actually getting pockets of data that you can start to use is more valuable than trying to create a single platform?
I think you want to build to a place where your data is talking to each other, because there's no question that value gets unlocked sort of almost exponentially as your operations data can talk to your customer data, etc. Use cases get unlocked. That doesn't necessarily mean that it all needs to be housed in a single place.
Can we talk about real-time data? Everybody's very excited about the possibility that AI will enable them to make decisions absolutely in the moment. Is that a trend you see? Is that something where you recommend retailers should start?
The most important real-time impact is still being ready when a real-time thing happens. Somebody clicks on a website, they're using a scan as a shop device in a store, and is their behavior consistent with what had been a prediction from a CRM or some other system? So for example, if we think the thing that we really want to give them an offer about is a non-alcoholic beer, but at the time they are looking at chips, do I overrule that in real time and make it there? You don't actually need real-time processing for that. What you need is a set of pre-processed rules that govern it, so in the real-time trigger comes and you make it. And that is still, for the next 5 years, is going to be the vast majority of what creates a really personalised real-time experience.
You mentioned media there, and retail media is a topic we've all talked about so many times. And how are you positioning yourselves to make the most of that market? And what advice or commentary would you have towards retailers who are looking at that, but maybe aren't certain how they'll derive the benefit from it?
So the main thing that we talk to clients about for retail media is it's a must-have, not a nice-to-have. Some people think this is a optional area. Or, for example, if you are a private label-only retailer, you don't need it because it's a standalone revenue. We think that's wrong. We think that part of being a retailer is introducing your customers to new products, and it could be anything as simple as packaging to new ingredients to new opportunities. And if you don't do that, you're going backwards. So as a retailer, you actually, on behalf of your customers, need to find smarter ways to introduce customers to products perhaps they hadn't known they wanted, or to try things out. And that's both in store as well as digitally. The picture view is this is not an optional conversation for retailers. It's not some incremental revenue stream that may be too complicated. It's actually part of your customer proposition.
We've talked a lot about sort of the benefits of data, the use of data and greater automation. How does an organisation balance becoming very reliant on automated analysis and still retaining some sort of human intervention?
Making sure that an organisation doesn't become completely automated. A lot of the magic in any organisation will still come from the human contact with your customers and the creativity of your people in your organisation. And to Josh's point earlier, your crystal clarity on what it is you want to be famous for. And if you allow yourself to sort of purely have that be automated, it will become bland. So organisations need to maintain that. I think the second dimension to it is what's brilliant about AI is it'll increasingly more accurately predict, give better and better recommendations, and the easy things, of course, will become more and more automated. And there's almost like an elevated skill required for the people within the organisation to make sure they're asking the right questions and knowing when the data only takes you so far. And I need to say, hang on a minute, in this circumstance, because of X, Y, and Z, the right thing to do is the following, and blend data. So I think humans and machines together will always be the unlock of the real magic.
And can I ask you, looking to the crystal ball, 3 to 5 years out, what do you think the newer technologies will be facing in that kind of time horizon? And how do you, as a chief exec, get your business ready for that?
I think the big outcome of the tech, and it's actually the goal setting, I think the big change is less about, to some extent, some fundamentally new tech. It's how you combine them in different ways. The optimization of the relationship between the suppliers, the brands, and the retailers, I think is going to be very different with the technology. So, for example, a lot of buyers spend lots of times doing promotional planning, well, that will get optimized by tech. And a lot of the brands have spent time pitching their innovation to the retailer. Well, actually, the retailer's data means they know the price point and the quality threshold that they want the suppliers to do. We're going to see a lot more organizational change in the roles and the accountabilities than perhaps is being seen overtly right now.
And Josh, specifically, how's dunnhumby preparing for that kind of a future?
So we've got one big area beyond how do we help optimize price, work with all changes that we want to do, which is traditionally, if you think of most distributors, which is what a retailer is, the role has been, how do we provide the right choice of products for the consumer to choose what they want to buy? We are really helping you shop better because you're shopping with us as a retailer. And we're going to do that by helping with, whether it's the app, which will increasingly be agentic AI type enabled, whether it's some ranges which is personalized, which doesn't have to physically be in the store because it can be distributed separately to you, and the level of nudges or suggestions that you want as the consumer, whoever I'm shopping with, not only because it's really convenient and it's great value, but I am shopping and eating better, whatever that means to me, because I'm there. And that's the huge value proposition opportunity for retailers in this world.
Josh, Catherine, thanks very much. It's been a particularly interesting conversation, I think of value to a lot of our clients.
Thank you.
Thank you.